Hey friends, what is up and welcome back to my channel. As you guys can tell from the title of today's video, we're going to be doing a very chill, laid back May wrap up. Probably going to ramble on about these books. I read 6 books this month. I'm actually really proud of myself. I wasn't going to film this video, which is why we are in Rocco's house, because I stayed over here last night and I woke up and was like, well, I'm filming 2 vlogs right now. I don't really need to film. But I realized in going into the month of June with Feel Good-a-thon happening, which I will link up here if you guys want information on that, I wanted to have a clean slate. So I wanted to talk about the books that I have finished this month to go into June completely on a clean slate. There's going to be a vlog on a secret TBR that I'm doing, as well as my weekly reading vlog that'll also go up this week, and then vlogs after that will be for the Feel Good-a-thon. So look forward to that in the second week of June. But I wanted to, like I said, to sit down and talk to you guys about the books I read in May, because I think this might be the most informative reading month I've had in a while. I feel like a lot of opinions on the types of books that I consume and things that I like in the literature that I consume were really made apparent to me. And I really appreciate it because a lot of the books that I enjoyed this month were recommendations from you guys for my secret TBR. So first book I read is a book that I've been listening to on audiobook for a while. I ended up giving it 3 stars, which shocked a lot of people, and that would be The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Now, started off on a positive note, things that I liked about this book. I think this book, the writing style is really good. I don't know another way to explain it. I feel like it's very easy to read. The POVs are very obvious. It is easy to follow along with the story. Like the overall arching plot of the book is that Kavoth's family is killed by something called the Chantry, and there is magic involved, and it's it's obviously like a fantasy book, and it's very basic of what the story is. It is told years later from Kavoth's perspective, and I liked some of the minor characters that were in the story a lot. Now, getting to things that and it's really atmospheric. Obviously, that's a given. If I like a book, it tends to be there's some sort of atmosphere that I really do like, and despite this being a fantasy novel, it did have some creepy elements to it that I did enjoy. Getting to things I didn't like about the book and why I ended up giving it 3 stars instead of 4 or 5. Overall, my enjoyment of this book really waned towards the middle, and that is because a lot of the book is told from Kavoth's perspective, and I was really struggling with what was later pointed out to me as an unreliable narrator. And I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of unreliable narrators. I realized from reading this book, one of the things that I realized from the month of May. I like narrators who really tell a story and tell it the way it is, and you can get the vibe, like the thing that I was struggling with, that Kavoth is very intelligent, able to talk his way out of things, very wise, just overall great academically, has the answers for everything, is just a good person and saves people. And it was kind of ridiculous, and I was really struggling with that. And a bunch of you guys messaged me and said he's an unreliable narrator. And I started piecing it together because towards the beginning of the book, when there are other characters involved, because like I said, the story is told much later from Kavoth's perspective, but at the beginning of the book, you get a little bit of background from other characters and his interactions as an adult with the other characters in the story, and I was hooked. I was really excited. Towards the end of the book, when things start to kind of come together for the beginning of the second book and some of the types of creatures that are introduced and sort of a little bit more information that you get, I really enjoyed that as well. But the middle 50% of the book, it really drug for me because like I said, it's building a backstory on Kavoth himself told from his perspective, and he's going to want to make himself look great. And that really bugged me. I just didn't really enjoy it. I will say though that I am excited for the next one though. It's not deterring me from wanting to continue with the series, but I wouldn't tout it as one of the best ones I've ever read, although 3 stars is still a very good rating for me. Another thing that I didn't like about this book is I don't like Denna as a love interest, and that is actually addressed later, which I really appreciated. So a lot of the novel is Kavoth attempting to get her to fall in love with him, and he really likes her, almost to the point of obsession, to where he goes back day in and day out trying to find her to be able to just spend a moment with her. And I know that's supposed to be cute, but it came off kind of creepy to me, and she's just one of those characters that I didn't connect with, and that's really on like her as a character and her as like a person throughout the book. I didn't necessarily enjoy that, but later on in the book you do find out that there's reasons for the way that she is, and you can kind of, it's hinted at there's some sort of trauma in her past, so I kind of appreciated that, not in like a I appreciated that she's gone through trauma, but that was sort of addressed and was built into her character, and it made her character seem, more substantial. And also at one point in time, Kavoth says, I don't want to keep pursuing her. Everyone has pursued her. I don't really feel like I need to be somebody who also does that to her, and I appreciate it. So I'm hoping that going into the second one, she will be more of a pivotal character in the book without necessarily being automatically reduced to being a love interest. So not my favorite book that I read of the month, but not necessarily the worst one either. And like I said, I have already started The Wise Man's Fear, which is the second one in the series, and I'm liking it so far a lot more than I actually liked The Name of the Wind. And hopefully I don't have that lull in the middle like I did with the first one. The next book I read is actually a book that you guys recommended to me, and this is part of a secret TBR that I have coming, which the vlog for that should be up, like I said, this week as well. And that would be The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This book was really confusing to me, but I ended up giving it 4 stars out of pure enjoyment. This book follows Zachary Rollins, and he is a young man when he finds a door that is basically painted on, or what he thinks is painted on the side of a building, and he has the desire to go up to that door and open it, but he doesn't. And a lot of the book follows the fact that he feels like he is missing something in his life. He's missing part of his story. And that's really what the book revolves around. It's a very simple plot, I think. But the story itself becomes very rich because it is a fantastical, I don't know if it's like magical realism or what, but it is very much so about stories coming together in different timelines and the part that we play in our own story and the parts that other people play in the story as well. So like I said, the plot's very basic, but the book itself I feel like is very rich. It's very atmospheric. It's very whimsical. And I've realized that I do like whimsical and I've spoken about how I don't necessarily enjoy Laini Taylor's writing style, and I think I lumped that in with whimsical writing and in turn became afraid to read authors who are touted as very whimsical, like Erin Morgenstern. And I'm sad that I waited because I actually ended up really liking this book, and this was our read, rate, review pick, and I'm sad that I didn't read it then because I think I would have been one of the very few people that could have been like, no, I actually really liked it, because from what I heard, a lot of people didn't. But overall for me, I think key points to this book that I really liked were the whimsicalness of it. The writing style was really succinct, and I feel like I didn't struggle with keeping along with the story, even though at times the story could kind of be confusing. The plot was lost a little bit, but I think it's because there are so many stories being told. There are a lot of perspectives. I did listen to this on audiobook, and the cast is phenomenal for this. So very enjoyable for me, for one. I also like there was a lot of rep in this. Zachary is gay, as well as there's another character in this book who is bi. I don't really want to give that away, but like I said, there is a lot of rep in it, and it's done not heavy-handed at all. It was just that's how the characters are, and like a great love story is being told between 2 gay characters, and I was really excited about that. And it's just overall for me a very beautiful book. Like when you are reading it or listening to it, I feel like it paints a very interesting picture, and I would love to see this made into a movie. I think this could be something that would be really strong as a movie, but I did enjoy it as a book. I would recommend it to people. Just be wary, like I said, it is very whimsical, and if you're not somebody who doesn't really like that kind of stuff, I don't necessarily know that you would love it, but I ended up giving it 4 stars and I really liked it. The next book that you guys recommended to me, which I was pleasantly surprised I loved, was The Boneless Mercies, and this follows your main character Frey, and she's part of a group called the Mercies. There are 3 other girls and 1 gentleman who are in their group, and they are essentially people who go around doing mercy killings, and a lot of communities will hire them. So say like somebody is injured and basically just wants to die, or somebody who's much older who's dying from a disease, or a sickness or something, it's considered a mercy killing that their families are hiring mercies to do. There are some revenge killings done by the Mercies for people who hurt children or animals, and they're not necessarily supposed to do that. That's kind of against their code, which brings them to this sort of moment of self-discovery where the people, Frey and the people in her group, one of them says, we should find something else to do, because this is like, they aren't called to do this. They feel like they're, called for more. And that's when I figured out that the book is actually a Beowulf retelling, a female Beowulf retelling. Now, I'm not necessarily the most knowledgeable with Beowulf. My only foray into that was actually going to the Renaissance Fair, and there is a troupe that does a Beowulf retelling, and that's like the only way that I've been exposed to it. But it is about a giant essentially who is wreaking havoc, and she's called like a beast or something, and people around the nation are attempting to kill it, and no one is successful. Well, Frey and her group decided they were going to be the people to do it. Things that I really liked about this book, I found the characters really interesting. Frey especially, because you get a lot of what it means to be a good person and the decisions that you make, because Frey obviously is a mercy and they do mercy killings, so there's a lot of death in their lives, but there's also a point in the book, which I don't really want to talk about because I don't want to spoil it, but where Frey is given what seems to be an easy choice, and she really struggles with it, and I appreciated that. There's a lot of that in this book. Also, there's very little romance. There is one sexual encounter towards the end of the book, and one of the minor characters is talking about like a previous relationship to establish a little bit more about their character. But other than that, there's no romance in the book, and that was so nice. There's no awkward love triangles. There's no like general like banter interest. Like this is through and through just a fantasy story. And I really liked that. I thought the book was really strong. I think that the overall story was really interesting. I don't feel like I lost the plot at any point in time. I definitely like really enjoyed the fact that all the characters that were really strong and like the focal point of the book were female characters, and they were done in a very realistic way. I think they weren't made to be, you know, crazy strong or crazy intelligent or whatever. They're very human, and I loved that. And I think the overall story was just really interesting. So I really appreciated this book, and I think more people should be reading it and more people should be talking about it, because overall I think that this is a really, really underrated book. Second to last book that I read is one that I have really mixed feelings on, and it'd be definitely Hallows by J.K. Rowling. Now, just to get it out of the way, you guys know that I am not contributing to the pockets of J.K. Rowling right now because of some of the comments that she has made. And while I am someone who can separate art from artist most of the time, I draw a hard line at when I feel like an artist is using that income to support some of oppression of other people. And that's actually something that I really need to rethink, because you don't really know what somebody's doing with their money. So it's hard to want to, like for me, it's hard to sometimes separate art from artists when it comes to things like that. I feel like I make excuses for a lot of artists that I necessarily enjoy that do have, you know, feelings like this. J.K. Rowling has been an especially hard author to do this with, though, because she has not fully addressed like some of the comments that she has made and some of the calling out that people have done on her. And I feel like being silent is just, it's a confirmation. Like if you're feeling like people are slandering you, or that you don't necessarily feel that way, or you feel like people are wrong in how they perceive the way that you feel, you'd want to correct them. And I feel like she's not doing that, which is her way of like being like, well, I'm not going to lie. I'm just not going to speak about it. So it's a really touchy subject. I will say it didn't take away from my enjoyment of the book, and there are some very specific reasons why I gave it 4 stars. So things I like about this book, it's really nostalgic for me. I love Hermione and Ron in this book. It's finally when their relationship is solidified. I love how adorable that is. I love that other characters become main characters in this book, especially Neville. I really enjoyed Neville's part of this. I liked some of the struggles that Lupin had in this book. I feel like for me, there was just a lot of minor or side characters that became, once again, really important characters in this book. Outside of that, though, I had some really big issues with it, and not necessarily from a, you know, problematic point of view, but just my overall enjoyment of the book. So one thing that I don't really like about this book is we have all loved Dumbledore from the very beginning, and this book really shows that he, while he is repentant for these actions, was not the greatest person. And that kind of bugged me, because we've kind of put him on a pedestal, and while he, like I said, is sorry for the things that he's done, it doesn't take away from the fact that he basically used Harry to, you know, an ends to, like a means to an end. And that really didn't sit right with me, especially when people, and I've always said this, but I think rereading it really solidified it in my head once again. But especially when people like to be like, oh, well, Snape's like a huge piece of shit. And it's like, well, yeah, but Dumbledore also is a huge piece of shit. But I will say Snape is probably a bigger piece of shit, which is one of the things that I really struggled with this book. I have always been somebody who has defended Snape. And I realize now, because this is the first time I've reread this book, because I've reread a lot of, you know, the earlier ones, because I'll feel nostalgic and I'll start reading them again, and then, you know, I'll quit. But this is the first time I've reread this book, and it really opened my eyes to the fact that Snape really is a horrible person. Like, people are spot on. And I think the problem is that we idolize Snape from the movie, which a lot of some of the deeper stuff that is presented in the book is kind of lost. And I feel like it's a lot easier to stomach how, like, the wrong things that Snape does in the movie, because people love Alan Rickman so much and they get so attached to him and his memory or him playing the character that they tend to kind of make excuses, because it is really kind of hard, once again, to separate an artist from their work. Like, a lot of people, when they think of Snape, they see Alan Rickman in their head. So I'm definitely one of those people. But rereading the book, it was like, oh my God, he actually is a horrible person, and I regret ever really defending him, and not necessarily to a point where, like, I'm gonna beat myself up about it or whatever, but It's pretty obvious, like the child abuse that happens, the twistedness of him, the fact that he is a Death Eater and never really loses sight of that. And the reason why he even helps at all is for very selfish reasons, and like his love for Lily, but his blatant disregard for everyone in Lily's life. And it was just a lot. And that definitely took my enjoyment down of the entire book. Another thing that I didn't really like is the overall feel of this book when you first start listening to it is very different. And I think that is also because it's the final book, but I really feel like Harry kind of loses himself throughout this book. And while it makes sense from an enjoyment point of view, I didn't like it. I didn't like Harry's character for a lot of this book. I found him argumentative. I found him cruel, especially when he talks to Lupin about stuff. I just feel like it was very different from the Harry that I knew, but that brought it down a very minute place because it doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with the storytelling of the book, just mostly about like my enjoyment of it. One thing I will say that brought this book down an entire point for me, that really brought it down to a 4-star, because I really rated this book 3.5 stars, but I rounded it up to 4 for nostalgic purposes. But one thing that brought the book down an entire point for me is I have always touted this book as a really clean ending. I feel like it answered a lot of questions, like I've always said that. But looking back on it and really thinking about the book, there is a point towards the end of the book when Harry dies. There's going to be spoilers, I'm sorry, because if you haven't read the books by now, like what the fuck, but you're probably not going to. But when Harry dies and he's talking to Dumbledore, and Harry, is asking him questions, and Dumbledore is like telling a story, and he's like, I don't have the answers for everything, but usually when I guess, my answers tend to be right. And a little bit of time passes throughout the conversation. And Harry then proceeds to ask Dumbledore for answers to some of the questions that I feel like a lot of us as readers had. And Dumbledore says, well, I don't know the answers to those. And Harry goes, well, usually your guesses are right. So what do you think? And I feel like that is such lazy storytelling. That is so like, okay, well, you can come to your own conclusions. Like, what are your theories? Do you believe Dumbledore? Like, do you think he's correct or whatever? Like, no, just give me you've had 7 books, like, put it all together for me. And that's really like, it's really very much so that he's like, he says, I don't have the answers for that. And then Harry's like, well, guess, because, usually you're correct. It's so lazy. It's like, we want the answers. If by now you haven't figured out the answers to these things, like, what the fuck? Like I remember reading this, and even as like a young kid and even as an adult now, there's a lot of plot and mystery and twists and turns in this book. Like she could have written a better ending. Like it really bugged me. And especially like now looking back on how cheesy the ending of that book is, like the actual ending when, all of their kids are going away to Hogwarts and like, we named our son, like, first off, why the fuck would you name your kid Severus? But anyway, it really just didn't sit with me. It felt like really lazy storytelling, and I do not, above anything, I hate lazy storytelling. I think it's one thing to have an open ending, if it follows sort of the overall feel of the book. If the book feels very mysterious and open like that, then that's fine. But Harry Potter has very much so been from A to B, this is what happened. Over and over and over again throughout the entire series. And then suddenly it was, oh, like, I don't have the answers. Like, you'll just have to figure it out yourself, Harry. And that felt very lazy to me. So that took it down an entire point, because I feel like I may not have noticed it because there's so much happening in the last book. But now as an adult rereading it, and especially thinking critically about things that I read, I'm like, it just brought it down for me. I wanted a succinct, true ending to the book, and I definitely didn't get that. And the last book that I have to talk about today is The Invisible Library. This is another recommendation from you guys, and once again, I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I think the overall plot of it is really interesting, and that's what really got me. It's about Irene. She is a librarian, she basically works for something called the library, and it's a secret society, and they are able to kind of travel between different dimensions, essentially different times, dimensions actually. Like, we may live here in our dimension, but there are, 100 other mirrored dimensions of us. And basically what the librarians do is they go and get rare works of fiction throughout each time. And so, for example, maybe a book exists in our dimension and only our dimension. It is the librarian's job to go and get that book and bring it back to what is called the library, which is basically a big library of a bunch of information that exists only in certain places. I thought that was really cool. It definitely has like a lot of secret you know, kind of society vibes. And I really liked Irene as a character. There's a lot of back and forth between her and Kai, I think is his name, which I don't know why I can never remember his name, but is basically her student, or the person that she is working with to go and get a certain work of fiction. Another thing that I really liked about this book, as simple as the plot is, Irene and Kai go to a place that is considered, I can't remember what the actual technical term is, but it is basically when fantasy and real life meet. So there are fae, there are dragons, there is magic and things that exist in the dimension that they're going to. And there's a man who at one point in time is part of the library and ends up leaving and basically living for hundreds of years and becoming all powerful, and he is the main like bad guy in this book. And I found him really interesting, especially their interactions with him, because he is also searching for the same book that they are searching for. So it had a lot of like James Bond, Secret Service kind of feel to it, as well as a lot of fantasy. Now this is touted as steampunk, and I didn't get a whole lot of like steampunk vibes, but it is a series, so maybe I will continue with it. I'm hoping to continue with it. I did buy this on Kindle. This is a Kindle book that I bought. But I did really enjoy it. I ended up also listening to it on audiobook, and I think the audiobook is not the best way to go. I think the narrator reads very slow, and even as somebody who enjoys like faster paced stuff, even if you don't enjoy faster paced stuff, I think you're probably still gonna think that she reads pretty slow. So it was enjoyable regardless though. I thought the story was really interesting, and like I said, I do want to continue on with the series because I think the overall like secret library, like people hunting down works of fiction, I thought that was really cool and something that I'm definitely going to want to continue on. It was just very cool, and I don't know how many times I can say cool. It was cool. I enjoyed it. Like basing this book off of enjoyment, I would have given it 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars because towards the end of the book, things start getting kind of crazy, and like a little bit of the plot sort of falls to the wayside, and it's a lot of, I don't know, it gets very, what's the word? I saw a review that somebody else where they agreed with me on it. Zany. It becomes very zany, and like crazy things start to happen, and you're just like, what the fuck? Like, let's reel it in, people. We're trying to tell a story here. But overall, I did really enjoy it, and I am interested in continuing with the series. So that's really like all you can ask. But those are the books that I read in May. I really enjoyed my reading month, and it's not like I went into things critically, like from the beginning. I really wanted to base this on enjoyment overall, so I didn't really go into anything critically, but I did come out with a lot of thoughts on like my reading and the kind of books that I enjoy reading and kind of things that I don't like in literature and things that I do enjoy. And I found out a lot about myself for the month of May, but it was a good reading month regardless. Let me know down below a book you read that you liked, or a book that maybe you read that you didn't like and why, or your top book of the month, or if you read it all, or how you're feeling. Like, let me know down below. I'd really like to know. But I love you guys a lot. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Hey guys, what is up, and welcome back to my channel. As you can tell from the title of today's video, we're going to be filming a haul. I have already filmed this video a couple of times, and the reason why I have restarted it is because I don't think I'm speaking eloquently enough. I don't think I'm struggling with this issue that I have about not wanting to know too much about books and then therefore buying books blindly. And then when I talk